The sun was beginning its slow, amber descent behind the ancient oaks of Maple Street when the silence of my porch was broken. My son, the boy I had once rocked to sleep, stood before me with a coldness that seemed to leach the warmth right out of the air. "I sold your house, Amaya," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the tremor one might expect from someone breaking their mother's heart. "Tiffany and we deserve a real vacation. 10 years of marriage, Mom. We've worked hard. You have one day to pack your things." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. It was a quiet, knowing smile that made him falter for just a heartbeat. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the house wasn't his to sell. "I'm glad you're here with me today to hear how this ends. Please settle in, like this video, and stay with me until the final word. And tell me, which city are you listening from? It helps me feel less alone to know how far my story has traveled. For 37 years, this two-story colonial had been my universe. Every creaking floorboard under the rugs was a record of a life lived. I raised Brian here. I sat by the fireplace with my husband, Tom, for decades until the cancer took him 5 years ago. After he passed, the house became a sanctuary, and, I suppose, a burden. It was too big for one woman, but how do you abandon the walls that hold the echo of your husband's laugh? Brian had always been my pride. A successful financial consultant, or so I thought. He was married to Tiffany, a woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. They lived in a modern, sterile townhouse 40 minutes away. Our relationship was cordial. Sunday dinners, polite birthday calls. The usual dance of adult children. But 6 months ago the dance changed. It started with innocent questions. "Mom, isn't the dusting getting to be too much? Have you seen the property tax hike?" Then the unannounced visits. Tiffany would pace through my rooms, her sharp eyes scanning the crown molding like she was already calculating the commission. "We're just worried, Amaya," she'd say, her voice dripping with a syrup that tasted like copper. "A woman your age. What if you fall? What if you forget the stove?" I was 68, not 90. Gardened. I drove. Had a life. But they spoke to me as if I were already a ghost haunting my own hallways. Then came that Tuesday in October. Brian arrived alone. No Tiffany. He stood in the living room, silhouetted against the window where I used to measure his height with a pencil. "The sale closes tomorrow," he said, checking his watch as if my life were a scheduled meeting. "We found you a nice assisted living facility. Sunset Gardens. 1 bedroom. All utilities included. You'll be safer there." Safer. That word again. It was a cage wrapped in a ribbon. He had stolen my home to fund a trip to the Maldives. He was willing to trade my history for a white sand beach and a few Instagram photos. But as I sat in Tom's old leather armchair after Brian drove away, a strange calm washed over me. I opened my laptop. Brian always underestimated my technological capabilities. I pulled up the property records. It took 40 minutes and a few calls, but there it was in black and white. The Sanderson Family Trust, established 2021. Trustee, Amaya Sanderson. Tom and I had been smart. The house wasn't in my name. It was in the trust. Brian was a beneficiary after my death, but he had zero authority while I breathed. He had either forged my signature or lied to a buyer. Either way, he had walked into a trap of his own making. Called Sarah Morrison. She was Tom's old law school roommate and the toughest estate attorney in 3 counties. When she arrived the next morning, her briefcase looked like a weapon of war. "Tell me everything, Amaya," she said. By 2:45 p.m. the moving van pulled up. I watched from behind the lace curtains as 2 men approached. Sarah opened the door before they could even knock. "This move is unauthorized," Sarah stated, her voice like grinding stones. "Brian Sanderson has no legal standing here." If you touch a single piece of furniture, I will have the police here for trespassing and attempted grand plastic. When Brian and Tiffany pulled up moments later, seeing the moving truck idle, the mask finally fell. Brian's face wasn't concerned anymore. It was purple with rage. "I'm your son," he screamed on my front lawn. "Everything you have should be mine anyway. You're just being selfish, holding on to this place when we need. When you need what, Brian?" I stepped out onto the porch, feeling a strength I hadn't felt since Tom was alive. Money for the Maldives. Or money to pay off the six-figure business loan you're drowning in. His silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The weeks that followed were a storm of love-bombing and threats. Tiffany sent emails crying about family unity. Brian sent roses, my favorites, with notes begging for a neutral meeting without lawyers. But I had found a new family. My book club, my support group at the community center, and Sarah. I realized that Brian didn't love me. He loved the equity in my walls. He didn't want me safe. He wanted me out of the way. The final confrontation happened on a Sunday morning. They brought a specialist, a Dr. Henshaw, to try and stage a cognitive intervention. They wanted to prove I was incompetent so they could seize the trust. I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I simply handed the doctor the documented evidence of their fraud, the forged signatures Sarah had discovered, and the credit card statements showing they had spent money they didn't have on a luxury resort. "I think you've been misinformed, doctor," I said softly. The doctor looked at the papers, looked at Brian's trembling hands, and walked away without a word. As I stand in my garden today, the hydrangeas are finally starting to bloom. My son hasn't called in months. The silence in the house is no longer heavy. It's peaceful. I realize that being a mother means sacrificing a lot, but it doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity or your right to exist. I am Amaya Sanderson. I am 68 years old. I am the trustee of my own life. Thank you for listening to my story. It's a hard thing to admit when the person you love most tries to hurt you, but there is so much strength in the truth. The silence that followed their departure was the heaviest I had ever known. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleeping house, but the ringing silence that follows a massive explosion. I stood in my garden, the pruning shears heavy in my hand, watching the dust settle on the road where Brian's car had screeched away. I realized then that the vacation he wanted wasn't just a trip to the Maldives. He wanted a vacation from his own life, from the debts, the pretenses, and the mother who reminded him of the man he used to be. A week later, Sarah called me into her office. The mahogany walls felt like a fortress. She pushed a folder across the desk. "We have enough for a criminal case, Amaya," she said quietly. "The signature on the intent to sell document. It's a sophisticated forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. If we go to the police, Brian could face prison time for elder fraud." I stared at the signature. It looked so much like my own hand, the way I loop my Y, the way I slant this. He had practiced this. While I was making him tea or asking about his day, he had been practicing how to erase me. "No," I whispered. "No police." Sarah frowned. "Amaya, he tried to take everything." "I know," I said, feeling a strange, cold clarity. "But I won't be the mother who puts her son in a cage. I'll just be the mother who finally closes the door." I had Sarah draft a final settlement. I wouldn't press charges, but Brian was to be officially removed as a beneficiary of the Sanderson family trust. Every penny that would have been his, the house, the savings, Tom's life insurance, would instead be diverted to a foundation for elder protection. He was being disinherited, not out of spite, but out of necessity. You cannot give the keys to the kingdom to the person trying to burn it down. Months passed. Changed the locks. I installed a security system that sent alerts to my phone, a small digital tether to my own safety. Began to heal. I spent my afternoons at the library, helping other seniors navigate the same digital world Brian thought I was too old to understand. Then, at 2 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday, my phone vibrated. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered. The breath on the other end was ragged, wet with tears. "Mom!" It was Brian. Not the arrogant man in the silver sedan, but a broken version. He told me Tiffany had left him when the luxury townhouse was foreclosed. He was staying in a motel. He had lost his job at the firm after the inquiries into his finances became too loud to ignore. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. I lost my way. Please, Amaya. I have nowhere to go. Can I just come home for a few days? Just to sleep in my old room." My heart, that stubborn organ that still remembered the smell of his baby shampoo, ached. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to open the door and make him a bowl of soup. But I looked at the wall where the measurement marks of his height used to be. Marks he had been willing to paint over for a beach resort. "Brian," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. "You sold this house, remember? In your mind it's already gone. You can't come back to a place you've already destroyed. Mom, please. I've sent a list of local shelters and job placement services to your email," I said. "I've also paid for 1 month at a modest apartment in the city. It's not a mansion, and it's not the Maldives. So start. That is the last thing I will ever give you, Brian. The rest is up to you." I hung up before he could respond. I sat in the dark for a long time, crying for the son I had lost, but smiling for the woman I had found. Today, the house on Maple Street is full of life again, but not the life Brian intended. I've opened 2 of the spare rooms to women from the support group, Clara and Dorothy. We share the chores, we share the groceries, and we share the laughter. We call it the sanctuary. My son thought I was a selfish old woman for clinging to my memories. He didn't realize that memories aren't just about the past. They are the foundation we build our future on. I chose strength over silence. I chose myself over a lie. And as for the Maldives, sometimes on rainy afternoons, I look at pictures of those turquoise waters. They are beautiful, it's true. But they aren't nearly as beautiful as the view from my own front porch, knowing that I am exactly where I belong. Thank you for walking this path with me. It wasn't easy to tell the end of this story, but I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to set a boundary or stand up for your own life. The letter sat on my desk for 3 months before I found the courage to mail it. It wasn't a letter of forgiveness. Not exactly, but a letter of release. I told Brian that while I no longer held anger, I also no longer held a place for him at my table. You see, peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of boundaries. With Brian gone and the legal dust finally settled, the house felt too quiet for just 3 women. That's when the sanctuary evolved into something much larger. I worked with Sarah to officially designate the ground floor of the Colonial as a community hub. We called it Amaya's Garden. We didn't sell the house, we opened it. We started hosting financial literacy for seniors workshops and digital defense classes. I became the teacher Brian never thought I could be, showing men and women my age how to spot the red flags of the very fraud my own son had attempted. I realized that my story wasn't just my own. It was a blueprint for others. A 1.5 years after that fateful Tuesday, I was at the local grocery store, picking up flour for the bread Dorothy likes to bake. I saw a man in the produce aisle, his back to me. He was wearing a worn windbreaker, his hair thinning and unkempt. He was staring at the price of organic apples, his shoulders slumped with a weight I recognized. It was Brian. He didn't see me. I stood behind a display of oranges, my heart hammering a rhythm of old instincts. Part of me wanted to run to him, to tuck a $20 bill into his pocket, to ask if he was eating enough. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes when he told me I had 1 day to pack. I remembered the movers. I stayed where I was. I watched him pick up a single bruised apple and put it back. He looked around, his eyes scanning the store with a hollow, haunted expression. He looked like a man who had finally realized that the world doesn't owe you a luxury vacation just because you want one. I didn't feel joy at his misfortune. I felt a profound, quiet sadness. I had raised a boy to be a king, but I had forgotten to teach him how to be a man. I finished my shopping and walked out into the crisp autumn air. As I loaded the bags into my car, the same car Brian had tried to tell me I was too old to drive, I realized I didn't feel like a victim anymore. Felt like a survivor. That evening, the house was glowing with light. Clara was playing piano in the parlor, and the scent of rosemary chicken wafted from the kitchen. We had a full house for our weekly legacy circle, where people come to share stories of their lives so they aren't forgotten. As I sat in Tom's old armchair, now reupholstered in a vibrant, hopeful blue, I looked at the fireplace. The embers were glowing, warm and steady. My son thought he could sell my history. He thought he could put a price tag on 37 years of love and labor. But he was wrong. You can sell a roof and you can sell a wall, but you can never sell the spirit of the woman who made those things a home. I am Amaya Sanderson. I am still here, and I am finally truly free. My story has traveled far today, from my porch to wherever you are listening. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Means more than you know. I've been thinking about documenting the digital defense lessons I teach at the house to help others stay safe. Would you like me to share those tips with you? Or perhaps you'd like to hear the stories of the other women, Clara and Dorothy, who found their strength alongside me.